This book was generated using Speakter's AI voices. You can create human-like voiceovers in over 50 languages.
Rachel Innes had made a decision. She would rent Sunnyside for the summer, seeking a peaceful retreat from the bustling city life that had left her weary. The late afternoon sun painted the sky in hues of orange and pink as Rachel's car wound its way up the tree-lined driveway. Shadows danced across the manicured lawn, growing longer with each passing moment. As Sunnyside came into view, Rachel's breath caught in her throat. The grand old house stood before them, its weathered brick walls telling stories of years gone by, while ivy crept up its sides like nature's own embrace. In the back seat, Rachel's niece Gertrude leaned forward, her eyes sparkling with excitement. "Oh, Aunt Rachel," she breathed, her voice filled with wonder. "It's absolutely charming." The enthusiasm of youth radiated from her, a stark contrast to the quiet contemplation of her brother Halsey, who sat beside her. Rachel couldn't help but notice the slight furrow of Halsey's brow as his gaze fixed on the house. His silence spoke volumes, a mixture of curiosity and apprehension evident in his expression. She wondered what thoughts were brewing behind those observant eyes. As they stepped out of the car, the crunch of gravel under their feet seemed to echo in the stillness of the countryside. The air was thick with the scent of freshly cut grass and blooming flowers, a symphony of nature that filled Rachel's lungs. It was a welcome change from the perpetual smog of the city, and she found herself taking deep, appreciative breaths. "Well, here we are," Rachel announced, trying to infuse her voice with more confidence than she felt. "Our home for the summer." The words hung in the air, heavy with promise and possibility. They made their way into the house, their footsteps echoing through the empty rooms. The interior was a curious mix of faded grandeur and musty neglect, as if the house itself was holding its breath, waiting for new life to fill its halls. Dust motes danced in the shafts of sunlight that streamed through the windows, giving the space an almost ethereal quality. As the day wore on, they busied themselves with unpacking and exploring their temporary home. Gertrude flitted from room to room, her excitement infectious as she discovered hidden nooks and charming details. Her laughter bounced off the walls, breathing life into the old house. Halsey, ever the practical one, focused on checking the locks and familiarizing himself with the layout of the house, his movements methodical and purposeful. Rachel found herself drawn to the circular staircase that dominated the main hall. Its graceful curve seemed to beckon her, promising secrets and mysteries yet to be uncovered. As she ran her hand along the smooth banister, a shiver ran down her spine. The wood was cool beneath her palm, and for a moment she could almost imagine the countless hands that had touched this same spot over the years. As night fell, the house seemed to settle around them, creaking and groaning like an old man getting comfortable in his favorite chair. Rachel, Gertrude, and Halsey gathered in the cozy living room, the flickering fireplace casting dancing shadows on the walls. The warmth of the fire seemed to push back the encroaching darkness, creating a bubble of comfort in the unfamiliar space. "This is going to be a wonderful summer," Gertrude said, her voice soft with contentment as she curled up in an overstuffed armchair. Her eyes were heavy with sleep, but a smile still played on her lips. Halsey nodded in agreement, but Rachel couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The house felt too quiet, too still, as if it was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. She tried to push the feeling aside, attributing it to the natural unease of being in a new place. As they prepared for bed, the peaceful atmosphere they had cultivated throughout the evening began to unravel. Rachel was just drifting off to sleep, the unfamiliar bed finally feeling comfortable, when a sound jolted her awake. At first she thought it might be the house settling, but then she heard it again, a distinct creak, followed by another and another. Her heart pounding, Rachel sat up in bed, straining her ears. The sounds were unmistakable now. Footsteps, slow and deliberate, making their way up the circular staircase. Each step seemed to echo in the stillness of the night, growing louder and more ominous with each passing second. Panic gripped her as she realized they were not alone in the house. The peaceful retreat they had envisioned was shattered in an instant, replaced by a growing sense of dread. As the footsteps drew closer, Rachel's mind raced with possibilities, each more terrifying than the last. Her breath came in short, sharp gasps as she tried to decide what to do. Should she wake Gertrude and Halsey? Should she confront the intruder herself? Or should she hide, hoping that whoever was climbing the stairs would pass her by? The questions swirled in her mind, each option seeming more impossible than the last. The footsteps stopped, and for a moment, the silence was deafening. Rachel held her breath, her entire body tense as she waited for what would happen next. Then just as suddenly as they had begun, the footsteps started again, this time moving away, descending the staircase. Relief washed over Rachel, but it was short-lived. As the sound of the footsteps faded, a new noise pierced the night, a sharp, sudden thud, followed by an eerie silence that seemed to stretch on forever. Rachel lay frozen in her bed, her mind racing with possibilities. What had happened? Who had been in their house? And what was that final, ominous sound? Little did she know, as she finally drifted into an uneasy sleep, that the morning would bring answers far more terrifying than any she could have imagined. The household awoke to a chilling discovery that shattered their peaceful morning. There, on the circular staircase, lay the lifeless body of Arnold Armstrong, son of the previous owner, brutally murdered. Rachel's heart thundered in her chest as she stood rooted to the spot at the foot of the staircase. Her eyes, wide with disbelief, were fixed on the gruesome scene before her. The cheerful sunlight streaming through the windows seemed to mock the darkness of the moment, casting long, accusing shadows across Arnold's motionless form. The air grew thick and heavy, pressing down on Rachel's shoulders like a physical weight. The once inviting summer house now felt like a trap, its walls closing in with each passing second. The ticking of the grandfather clock in the hall seemed to grow louder, each tick a reminder of how quickly their idyllic getaway had transformed into a nightmare. A piercing scream shattered the silence. Rachel flinched, her nerves already frayed to breaking point. It was Liddy, her faithful maid, who had stumbled upon the scene. The scream echoed through the halls, bouncing off the walls and reverberating in Rachel's skull. Halsey, Rachel's nephew, rushed past her, his face a mask of shock and disbelief. He knelt beside Arnold's body, his hands hovering uncertainly, as if afraid to touch and make the nightmare real. He's dead, Halsey whispered, his voice cracking. With trembling hands, Rachel reached for the telephone. Her fingers fumbled with the dial, each number feeling like a monumental effort. When the operator answered, Rachel's voice was barely above a whisper as she requested the local authorities. "Please, there's been a murder." The wait for their arrival felt interminable. Rachel paced the floor, her slippers making soft, shushing sounds on the polished wood. Outside, birds chirped merrily, oblivious to the tragedy within. The contrast between the peaceful summer morning and the horror inside the house made Rachel's head spin. The crunch of gravel under tires announced the arrival of the police. Rachel's stomach clenched as she watched the first car pull up the driveway. The flashing lights cut through the morning haze, transforming the quaint summer retreat into a garish crime scene. Officers filed in, their faces grim and professional. Yellow tape appeared as if by magic, cordoning off the staircase and shattering any remaining illusion of normalcy. The click and flash of cameras punctuated the air, each snapshot preserving the gruesome scene for posterity. Questions flew at Rachel from all directions, each one feeling like a sharp jab to her already frayed nerves. How well did you know Arnold Armstrong? When was the last time you saw him? Did you hear anything unusual during the night? With each answer, Rachel felt herself being pulled deeper into a web of mystery and danger she never could have anticipated. The weight of responsibility settled heavily on her shoulders. As the current occupant of the house, she found herself at the center of the investigation, her every move scrutinized, her words dissected for hidden meanings. As the day wore on, the house buzzed with activity. Forensic teams combed every inch of the property, their meticulous work a stark reminder of the gravity of the situation. Rachel watched as they dusted for fingerprints, collected fibers, and photographed the scene. Each action drove home the reality that their summer retreat had become ground zero for a murder investigation. The carefree days of lounging on the porch and enjoying leisurely walks through the grounds seemed like a distant memory, replaced by a suffocating atmosphere of suspicion and fear. Rachel's mind raced with unanswered questions. Who would want Arnold Armstrong dead? What secrets did this house hold? And most chillingly, was the killer still among them? As the sun began to set, Rachel stood by the window, watching the long shadows creep across the lawn. The circular staircase, once an architectural marvel, now loomed in her mind as a sinister symbol of the mystery that had enveloped them all. She took a deep breath, steeling herself for another round of questioning. Just then, a commotion from outside caught her attention. Two police officers were engaged in an animated discussion, their voices rising with urgency. Rachel strained to hear their words, catching fragments that made her blood run cold. Can't find them anywhere. Nephew and his friend. Suspicious timing. A cold dread settled in the pit of Rachel's stomach as the implications sank in. Halsey and his friend Jack Bailey were nowhere to be found. In the chaos of the murder investigation, their absence had gone unnoticed until now. As night fell, casting the house in shadows, Rachel realized with growing horror that the murder was just the beginning. The disappearance of Halsey and Jack added another layer to the mystery, and she couldn't shake the feeling that things were about to get much, much worse. The gruesome murder had left an unsettling silence hanging over the house. Adding to the growing list of mysteries, Halsey and his friend Jack Bailey had vanished without a trace. The air felt thick, almost suffocating, as if the very walls were holding their breath. Every creak of a floorboard, every rustle of a curtain seemed to whisper secrets, taunting Rachel with the knowledge just beyond her grasp. As the first rays of dawn crept across the grounds, casting long, accusing shadows, Dr. Walker's arrival broke the eerie stillness. The local physician's weathered face was a map of concern as he stepped into the foyer, his black bag swinging like a pendulum at his side. The steady rhythm of its movement contrasted sharply with the chaos of the night before. I came as soon as I heard, he said, his voice a mixture of professional detachment and genuine worry. What can you tell me about last night? Rachel's eyes, red-rimmed from a sleepless night, met the doctor's. She felt her throat tighten as she began to recount the events, her voice trembling like a leaf clinging to its branch in the face of an autumn storm. With each word, Dr. Walker's brow furrowed deeper, his mind visibly piecing together the gruesome puzzle before him. This is most unusual, he muttered, more to himself than to Rachel. A murder, and now 2 young men missing? There's more here than meets the eye. As the doctor began his examination of the crime scene, Rachel felt a surge of determination course through her veins, hot and urgent. She couldn't sit idly by while her nephew was missing and a killer roamed free. With a deep breath that seemed to fill her entire being, she steeled herself for what lay ahead. I may not be a detective, she thought, her jaw set in grim determination, but I'll be damned if I don't try to uncover the truth. Rachel's amateur sleuthing began in earnest. She moved through the house like a ghost, her keen eyes searching for any detail that might have been overlooked. Every shadow seemed to hold a clue, every whisper of wind a potential revelation. In the library, the musty smell of old paper filled her nostrils as she pored over yellowed newspapers and family records, hoping to find some connection, some thread that would lead her to the truth. As the day wore on, the house seemed to close in around her, its walls pressing closer with each passing hour. The circular staircase, once a charming architectural feature, now loomed ominously. Its winding steps twisted like the convoluted path of her investigation, each turn promising answers but leading only to more questions. Rachel found herself pausing on the landing, her hand resting on the smooth banister. She closed her eyes, trying to imagine the events of that fateful night. The wood beneath her fingers seemed to pulse with hidden knowledge, as if the very house itself was trying to communicate with her. Dr. Walker's voice cut through her reverie like a knife. Mrs. Innes, he called from below, his tone urgent. I believe I found something of interest. Rachel's heart leapt into her throat as she descended the stairs, each step echoing with a mixture of hope and dread. What new piece of the puzzle had the good doctor uncovered? As the sun began its descent, casting an eerie blood-red glow through the windows, Rachel stood in the study with Dr. Walker. They pored over the evidence they had gathered, their voices low and urgent, as if speaking too loudly might scare away the truth they sought. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the shutters like the restless spirits of the house's dark secrets. With each passing hour, the mystery deepened, and the shadows of doubt grew longer. But Rachel was resolute, her determination burning like a flame in the encroaching darkness. She would not rest until she had answers, no matter where the twisted path of this investigation might lead. As night fell once more, Rachel found herself drawn to a part of the house she had never explored before. Her hand trembled as she reached for the doorknob of a room at the end of a long, dark hallway. Something told her that behind this door lay answers, or perhaps even more questions. Taking a deep breath, Rachel pushed open the creaky door, revealing a room untouched by time. The musty air tickled her nose as she stepped inside. Rachel pushed open the creaky door, revealing a room untouched by time. The musty air tickled her nose as she stepped inside. Dust motes swirled in thin shafts of light that struggled to penetrate the grimy windows, like golden fireflies trapped in amber. The chamber stretched before her, a forgotten treasure trove filled with relics of the Armstrong family's past. Her heart raced, a mix of excitement and trepidation coursing through her veins. Each step deeper into the room echoed softly, the floorboards groaning beneath her feet as if protesting this intrusion into their long solitude. Rachel's fingers trembled as she reached out, tracing the outline of an ornate picture frame. Its gilt edges, once gleaming with opulence, now wore a patina of neglect, whispering tales of faded glory. The air felt thick, heavy with secrets. Rachel's skin prickled, her senses heightened in this tomb of memories. She felt like an archaeologist unearthing a long-lost civilization, each object a clue to the mysteries that seemed to permeate every corner of Sunnyside. Suddenly, a floorboard creaked behind her. The sound sliced through the silence like a knife, freezing Rachel in place. Her breath caught in her throat, trapped there by the icy fingers of fear that gripped her heart. The hairs on the back of her neck stood on end, in primal warning system screaming danger. Time slowed to a crawl as Rachel turned, her movements as gradual and deliberate as the hour hand of a clock. Her heart pounded so fiercely she was sure it would burst from her chest. There, silhouetted in the doorway, like a specter from a nightmare, stood a figure shrouded in shadow. Rachel's mind raced through possibilities, each more terrifying than the last. An intruder? A ghost? Or something far more sinister that lurked in the depths of this old house? The figure took a step forward, the floorboard groaning under its weight. Rachel instinctively backed away, her hand groping blindly behind her for anything. A candlestick, a book, anything that could serve as a weapon. "Who's there?" The words escaped her lips as barely more than a whisper, her voice cracking with fear. The intruder remained silent, advancing further into the room. Rachel's back hit the wall, cold and unyielding. Panic surged through her veins like ice water, her breath coming in short, sharp gasps. She was trapped, cornered like a frightened animal with nowhere left to run. Just as the terror threatened to overwhelm her, nature intervened. A cloud shifted outside, allowing a beam of moonlight to pierce the gloom. The silvery light washed over the intruder's face, revealing features that were startlingly familiar. "John?" Rachel gasped, relief and confusion warring for dominance in her voice. The gardener stood before her, his weathered face etched with equal parts surprise and embarrassment. "Miss Rachel?" he stammered, clearly as shocked to find her there as she was to see him. "What are you doing up here?" As the adrenaline slowly ebbed from her system, leaving her feeling weak and shaky, Rachel's mind whirled with questions. Why was John, the gardener, skulking about in this hidden part of the house? What secrets did he know about Sunnyside and the Armstrongs that he wasn't sharing? This brief encounter shattered Rachel's perception of Sunnyside like a stone through glass. The grand house, which had seemed like a peaceful retreat, now felt like a labyrinth of secrets and hidden dangers. As she made her way back to her room, every shadow seemed to conceal a potential threat. Every creak of the old house, a warning of unseen perils. Rachel's mind raced as she tried to piece together the puzzle, the hidden chamber filled with forgotten treasures. The mysterious intruder who turned out to be John, a man she thought she knew. The palpable sense of secrets lurking just beneath the surface of this seemingly idyllic place. It all pointed to one inescapable conclusion. There was far more to Sunnyside and the Armstrong family than met the eye, and Rachel was now irrevocably entangled in whatever mystery lay at the heart of this place. As she closed her bedroom door behind her, the soft click of the latch sounding like the sealing of a tomb, Rachel knew that her peaceful summer retreat had transformed into something far more dangerous and exciting. Sleep would not come easily tonight, for her mind was alight with questions and theories. Whatever secrets Sunnyside held, Rachel was determined to uncover them, no matter the cost. She had just settled into an uneasy sleep when a sharp knock at her door jolted her awake. Heart pounding, Rachel stumbled to answer it, her mind still foggy with half-formed dreams. As she opened the door, she found herself face to face with Gertrude's fiancé, Mr. Jameson. His eyes glinted with determination, and the grim set of his jaw told Rachel that whatever news he brought, it wasn't good. "Miss Rachel," he said, his voice low and urgent, "we need to talk. Now." Gertrude's fiancé, Mr. Jameson, arrived at Sunnyside with a determined glint in his eye. His presence brought a fresh perspective to the investigation that had been consuming our lives. The gravel crunched under the wheels of his car, a sound that seemed to echo the tension building in my chest. I stood at the window, my fingers pressed against the cool glass, watching as he emerged from the vehicle. His tall frame cast a long shadow across the sun-dappled lawn, like a portent of the darkness yet to come. Gertrude, usually so composed, flew out the door in a flurry of movement. Her arms found their way around his neck, and for a moment I saw a flicker of the carefree young woman she used to be. But as they walked towards the house arm in arm, the weight of our circumstances seemed to settle back onto her shoulders. Mr. Jameson's brow was furrowed, his jaw set in a grim line. The house itself seemed to hold its breath, creaking and settling as if aware that his arrival might change everything. The very air felt charged, like the moments before a thunderstorm breaks. Once inside, the detective's sharp eyes darted around the room, taking in every detail. I could almost see the gears turning in his mind as we recounted the events of the past few days. The ticking of the grandfather clock in the corner punctuated our words, each second feeling like a countdown to some unknown revelation. "I see," he murmured, his voice low and thoughtful. The words hung in the air like smoke. "And you're certain you've explored every possible angle?" Before any of us could respond, the shrill ring of the telephone sliced through the air. We all jumped, nerves already frayed to breaking point. Liddy, her hands visibly shaking, answered the call. As she listened, the color drained from her face, leaving her as pale as the lace curtains framing the windows. A cold dread settled in the pit of my stomach, heavy as a stone. It's the bank," Liddy stammered, holding out the receiver with trembling fingers. I took the phone, my heart pounding so loudly I was sure everyone in the room could hear it. The voice on the other end was clipped and professional, but the news it delivered hit me like a physical blow. A significant theft had been discovered at the bank where Jack Bailey worked. The room seemed to tilt and spin around me as the implications sank in. Jack, already missing under suspicious circumstances, was now potentially implicated in a serious crime. The mystery that had been unfolding around us suddenly took on a darker, more sinister tone. I looked at Gertrude, watching as the blood drained from her face. Her eyes were wide with disbelief, her lips parted in a silent gasp. Mr. Jameson's expression hardened, his investigator's mind visibly racing to connect this new piece to the puzzle we'd been trying to solve. As I hung up the phone, the silence in the room was deafening. It pressed against my eardrums, broken only by the steady tick-tock of the clock, now sounding more like a countdown than ever before. The theft at the bank cast a long shadow over everything we thought we knew. Jack Bailey, once a trusted friend and colleague, now stood at the center of a web of suspicion and deceit. The case that had seemed complex before now felt like an impenetrable maze. Each new revelation only served to deepen the mystery, leaving us all feeling more lost and uncertain than ever. As the sun began to set outside, casting long shadows across the lawn, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were only at the beginning of a very dark and treacherous journey. Just then, a new sound broke through the heavy silence, the crunch of tires on gravel. We all turned towards the window, hearts racing. Through the gathering dusk, I could make out the outline of a car pulling up the driveway. It wasn't one I recognized. "Who could that be?" Gertrude whispered, her voice tight with anxiety. As we watched, frozen in place, the car door opened. A figure stepped out, silhouetted against the fading light. My breath caught in my throat as I realized who it was. "Louise," I gasped, my mind reeling. But why is she here, and why now? The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the lawn. Louise's car pulled up the gravel driveway, its tires crunching softly on the stones. I stood at the window, my fingers pressed against the cool glass, watching her arrival with a mix of anticipation and dread. Something about Louise's posture as she stepped out of the car sent a shiver down my spine. Her shoulders were hunched, her movements quick and furtive, as if she expected danger to leap out from behind every bush. The moment Louise entered the foyer, the atmosphere in Sunnyside shifted. The air grew thick and heavy, charged with an unseen tension that made it hard to breathe. I forced a smile, but it felt more like a grimace. "Welcome to Sunnyside, Louise," I said, my voice sounding strained even to my own ears. "I hope your journey wasn't too tiring." Louise's eyes darted around the room, taking in every detail with an intensity that bordered on desperation. Her fingers worried at the clasp of her handbag, a nervous tick that betrayed her outward composure. "Thank you, Rachel," she replied, her words clipped and careful. It was uneventful. The pause before that last word hung between us, pregnant with unspoken meaning. As I led Louise to her room, the floorboards creaked beneath our feet, each sound seeming to echo the secrets that filled the house. I couldn't shake the feeling that Louise was holding something back, that behind her polite facade lurked knowledge that could shatter our world. Her gaze lingered on certain objects, a faded photograph on the mantel, a closed door at the end of the hallway, each glance laden with significance I couldn't decipher. Dinner was a tense affair. The clink of silverware against china seemed unnaturally loud in the strained silence that enveloped us. Louise picked at her food, her fork scraping against the plate in a way that set my teeth on edge. I found myself studying her every move, searching for clues in the way she held herself, the inflection of her voice when she spoke of her family. "How are your parents, Louise?" I asked, attempting to break the oppressive quiet. Louise's hand trembled slightly as she reached for her water glass. "They're managing," she replied, her eyes fixed on the tablecloth. "Recent events have been hard on everyone." The weight of unspoken words hung heavy in the air. What did Louise know about the chaos that had engulfed our lives? Was she here to help unravel the mystery, or was her presence another thread in the tangled web of secrets that surrounded us? As night fell, Sunnyside seemed to close in around us. The darkness outside pressed against the windows, and shadows danced in the corners of the room. Louise's mysterious demeanor suggested she held crucial information, and I knew that unraveling her secrets would be key to understanding the darkness that had descended upon our once peaceful home. When I bid Louise good night, I caught a glimpse of something in her eyes, a flash of fear, quickly masked. It was then that I realized the true complexity of our situation. Louise wasn't just a visitor, she was a piece of the puzzle, and her presence at Sunnyside was about to change everything. As I turned to leave, Louise's voice stopped me. "Rachel," she said, her tone urgent, "there's something you need to know, something I found." She hesitated, glancing nervously at the shadows around us. "Meet me in the library at midnight, and whatever you do, don't tell anyone." With those cryptic words, she shut her door, leaving me standing in the hallway, my mind racing. What had Louise discovered, and why all the secrecy? I made my way to my room, my heart pounding with anticipation and fear. As I changed for bed, my eyes fell on the old writing desk in the corner. Something about Louise's words nagged at me, and on a hunch, I went to examine it more closely. My fingers traced the intricate woodwork, searching for something. Suddenly, I felt a slight give under my touch. A hidden compartment. With trembling hands, I carefully pried it open, my breath catching in my throat at what I found inside. Rachel's heart pounded as she carefully examined the hidden compartment. Her fingers trembled, brushing against a thick stack of bills and a bundle of important-looking documents. Rachel's heart pounded as she carefully examined the hidden compartment. Her fingers trembled, brushing against a thick stack of bills and a bundle of important-looking documents. The musty scent of old paper filled her nostrils, a tangible reminder of secrets long buried. She gently pulled the items from their hiding place, her mind racing with possibilities. The world around her seemed to fade away, narrowing to this singular, pivotal moment. Dust motes danced in the pale sunlight streaming through the window, casting an ethereal glow on the weathered papers in her hands. Rachel's breath caught in her throat, a mixture of excitement and trepidation coursing through her veins. As she leafed through the documents, each revelation hit her like a physical blow. Bank statements, loan agreements, and hastily scribbled notes painted a picture of financial turmoil and desperation. The money, far more than she'd expected to find, spoke volumes about the lengths someone might go to protect their secrets. Rachel's mind whirled like autumn leaves caught in a gust of wind, connecting dots she hadn't even known existed. The murder, the theft. Suddenly, they weren't isolated incidents, but pieces of a larger, more sinister puzzle. Her stomach churned, a nauseating mix of excitement and dread as the gravity of her discovery settled upon her like a heavy cloak. The floorboards creaked ominously, a sharp sound slicing through the silence. Rachel froze, her heart hammering against her ribcage. She strained her ears for any sign of an intruder, barely daring to breathe. The house settled back into silence, but the moment of fear served as a stark reminder of the danger she now faced. With shaking hands, Rachel carefully gathered the evidence. The weight of the knowledge she now possessed felt like a physical burden, pressing down on her shoulders and threatening to crush her. She knew she couldn't simply ignore what she'd found, but the path forward was fraught with peril, each step potentially leading to disaster. As she tucked the money and documents into her pocket, Rachel's mind raced through potential scenarios. Who could she trust with this information? How could she use it to unravel the mystery without putting herself in the crosshairs of whoever was behind these crimes? The questions swirled in her mind like a relentless storm, offering no easy answers. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the room, stretching like grasping fingers across the floor. It was a visual reminder of how time was slipping away, each passing moment bringing new dangers. Rachel took a deep breath, the air feeling thick and heavy in her lungs as she steeled herself for what was to come. She had to be careful, strategic in her approach. One wrong move could not only jeopardize the investigation, but potentially cost her her life. With a final glance around the room to ensure everything was as she'd found it, Rachel stepped toward the door. Her hand hesitated on the doorknob, cool metal against her clammy palm. She was at a crossroads, and the choice she made now would set in motion events that could change everything. The weight of responsibility settled on her shoulders like a physical presence. Rachel's fingers tightened on the doorknob, her resolve strengthening. She had come too far to turn back now. With a soft click that seemed to echo in the stillness, she opened the door and stepped out into the hallway. The silence that greeted her was unnatural, oppressive. Something was wrong. Rachel's senses went on high alert, every nerve in her body tingling with apprehension. And then, carried on a sudden draft, she caught a whiff of something that made her blood run cold. Smoke. Panic gripped her heart as the acrid smell grew stronger, unmistakable now. In the distance, she heard the first faint shouts of alarm. Rachel stood frozen for a moment, torn between the urge to flee and the need to warn others. As the smell of smoke intensified and the shouts grew louder, she realized with growing horror that her carefully laid plans were about to go up in flames. Perhaps literally. The acrid smell of smoke filled the air, assaulting our senses with its pungent intensity. Panicked shouts echoed through the hallways of Sunnyside, a cacophony of fear and confusion. Orange flames licked at the walls, casting eerie shadows that danced across terrified faces. The fire's hungry roar drowned out all other sounds, save for the frantic beating of my own heart. People rushed about in a frenzied state, their movements jerky and desperate as they grabbed whatever possessions they could before fleeing the inferno. The heat pressed against my skin like a physical force, sweat beading on my brow and trickling down my back. I pushed through the chaos, my eyes stinging from the smoke, searching desperately for familiar faces. "Halsey! Gertrude!" I called out, my voice hoarse and barely audible above the crackling flames. Each unanswered cry sent a fresh wave of panic through me, my imagination conjuring up horrific scenarios. As I stumbled through the smoke-filled corridors, a chilling realization struck me. Louise Armstrong was nowhere to be found. The young woman who had been at the center of so many unanswered questions had vanished without a trace. It was as if the flames had swallowed her whole, leaving behind only more mysteries in their wake. Outside, firefighters battled the blaze with grim determination. Their hoses spewed arcs of water that hissed and steamed as they met the hungry flames, the sound like angry serpents. But even as they fought to save the structure, I couldn't shake the feeling that something far more sinister was at play. The fire seemed to mock our efforts, growing stronger with each passing moment. It devoured potential evidence, turning clues to ash and leaving us grasping at smoke. As I watched the inferno consume Sunnyside, a nagging doubt crept into my mind, coiling around my thoughts like a poisonous vine. Was this truly an accident? A cruel twist of fate? Or had someone deliberately set this blaze, hoping to incinerate the truth along with the building? The crackling of burning wood and the crash of collapsing structures filled the air, punctuated by the shouts of firefighters and the sobs of those who watched their home burn. In the chaos, I caught glimpses of shocked faces, illuminated by the hellish glow of the fire. Each person seemed lost in their own private nightmare, unable to comprehend the destruction unfolding before their eyes. As dawn broke, casting a pale light over the smoldering ruins of Sunnyside, the full extent of the devastation became clear. The once grand house stood as a blackened skeleton, a haunting reminder of the secrets it had held. And somewhere out there, Louise Armstrong remained missing, her disappearance now intertwined with the mystery of the fire itself. The questions multiplied like sparks from the dying embers, each one burning into my mind. Had Louise fled in the confusion, seizing an opportunity to escape whatever troubles plagued her? Or had something more sinister befallen her in the chaos of the evacuation? The fire had not only threatened to destroy evidence, but had also deepened the enigma surrounding Louise and her involvement in the strange events at Sunnyside. As I stood there watching the last wisps of smoke rise into the morning sky, I couldn't shake the feeling that this fire was just the beginning. Whatever secrets Sunnyside had held, they were now buried beneath ash and rubble, waiting to be uncovered. And somewhere out there, Louise Armstrong held the key to unraveling it all. If only we could find her. Exhaustion settled over me like a heavy blanket, my limbs leaden and my mind foggy from the night's ordeal. I longed for nothing more than to close my eyes and forget the horrors I had witnessed. But as the first rays of sunlight began to peek over the horizon, a commotion near the garden caught my attention. My heart, already battered by the night's events, seemed to stutter in my chest as I made my way towards the gathering crowd. Something told me that the fire was only the beginning of our troubles, and that the new day would bring fresh horrors to light. The morning after the fire brought a chilling revelation. Thomas, the gardener, was found dead in the tulip bed. The discovery sent shockwaves through the household, already reeling from the previous night's inferno. As dawn broke, a thick mist clung to the scorched grounds, as if nature itself was trying to shroud the horrors that lay beneath. The air was heavy with the acrid smell of smoke and something else, something metallic and sickening. Mrs. Wilson's piercing scream cut through the eerie silence, shattering the false calm that had settled over the estate. The tulips, once Thomas's pride and joy, now drooped like mourners around his lifeless form. Their vibrant petals were stained a darker shade, a cruel mockery of their usual beauty. As the household staff gathered, their hushed whispers formed a constant undercurrent of fear and speculation. Detective Jameson arrived swiftly, his weathered face set in grim determination. He moved through the scene with practiced efficiency, his keen eyes taking in every detail. "This is no coincidence," he muttered, his words hanging in the air like a death sentence. The tension in the air was palpable, thick enough to choke on. Sarah, the young maid, couldn't stop trembling, her eyes wide with terror. "First Mr. Arnold, now Thomas," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Who's next?" The question echoed in everyone's minds, unspoken but ever present. As Jameson questioned each member of the household, suspicion spread like a virus. Every hesitation, every averted gaze became potential evidence. The once close-knit community of the estate was unraveling rapidly, trust giving way to paranoia with frightening speed. In the library, Miss Rachel paced relentlessly, her mind a whirlwind of thoughts and theories. The logical part of her brain struggled to make sense of the mounting evidence, while a primal fear gnawed at her insides. Could the killer really be among them? The idea seemed absurd, yet the facts were impossible to ignore. Outside, the garden stood as a silent witness to the tragedy. The roses Thomas had so lovingly tended now seemed to weep, their leaves rustling in the breeze as if whispering secrets just out of reach. The once peaceful grounds had transformed into a sinister landscape, every shadow potentially concealing danger. As the day wore on, the urgency to solve the case grew suffocating. Each tick of the clock felt like a countdown to the next tragedy. The grand old house, once a symbol of safety and comfort, had become a labyrinth of secrets and peril. Detective Jameson gathered everyone in the drawing room, the lines on his face deeper than ever. "Time is not on our side," he announced, his voice cutting through the tense silence like a knife. "The killer is still active, possibly among us. We must solve this case before more lives are lost." His words hung in the air, heavy with the weight of their implications. The mounting body count had turned their world upside down, transforming the estate into a battleground where trust was a luxury no one could afford. As night fell, casting long, menacing shadows across the grounds, a collective shudder ran through the household. The darkness seemed to creep in from all sides, bringing with it a suffocating sense of dread. In the stillness of the night, one question burned in everyone's mind, keeping sleep at bay. Who would be next? Just as the tension reached its breaking point, the sound of approaching footsteps echoed through the halls. Hearts raced, breaths caught in throats. Was it the killer coming to claim another victim? Or could it be? The door swung open, revealing a familiar face that no one had expected to see. Halsey's return washed a wave of relief over us all. His reappearance, however, brought with it a torrent of questions about his mysterious absence and the activities that had occupied him during that time. The moment Halsey stepped into the dimly lit foyer of Sunnyside, the air crackled with an almost palpable tension. The warm glow of the oil lamps cast long shadows across his face, accentuating the deep lines of exhaustion etched into his features. His usually carefree demeanor had vanished, replaced by a haunted look that sent a chill down my spine. His clothes hung on him like forgotten laundry, rumpled and stained as if he'd been wearing them for days on end. The grandfather clock in the corner ticked away relentlessly, each second stretching into an eternity as we stood in stunned silence. The familiar scent of polished wood and old books that usually brought comfort now seemed stifling, as if the very house was holding its breath in anticipation. "Where have you been?" I finally managed to ask, my voice barely above a whisper, afraid that speaking too loudly might shatter this fragile moment. Halsey's gaze met mine, and I saw a flicker of something, guilt perhaps, before he spoke. "I've been searching for Louise," he said, his words tumbling out in a rush, like water breaking through a dam. "She's gone missing, and I couldn't just sit here and do nothing." The revelation hit me like a physical blow, knocking the air from my lungs. Louise missing? My mind raced, trying to connect this new piece of information to the bizarre events that had been unfolding at Sunnyside. The creaking of the circular staircase seemed to echo my racing thoughts. Each groan of the old wood a sinister reminder of the secrets this house held. We moved to the sitting room, the floorboards groaning under our feet as if sharing in our burden. The fire in the hearth crackled and popped, casting dancing shadows on the walls that seemed to mock our growing unease. Halsey sank into an armchair, the leather sighing beneath his weight, and began to unravel the tangled web of his search. He spoke of shadowy figures glimpsed in the night, their faces hidden by the gloom of narrow alleyways. His voice dropped to a hoarse whisper as he recounted whispered conversations overheard in dingy bars, the air thick with smoke and suspicion. He told of clues that led nowhere, each dead end more frustrating than the last, and others that hinted at a conspiracy far larger than we had ever imagined. With each word, the room seemed to grow smaller, the walls closing in as the magnitude of the situation became clear. The familiar furnishings of Sunnyside, once a source of comfort, now felt like silent witnesses to a mounting horror. "There's more to this than just Louise's disappearance," Halsey said, his voice low and urgent. He leaned forward, his eyes darting around the room as if checking for unseen listeners. "I've uncovered information that ties everything together. The break-ins, the strange noises, even the murder." A chill ran down my spine, as if the very mention of these events had summoned the ghosts of our recent past. I pulled my shawl tighter around my shoulders, but it did little to dispel the cold dread that had settled over me. Halsey's eyes locked onto mine, his gaze intense and unwavering. "It's all connected to a conspiracy," he whispered, his breath warm against my ear, a stark contrast to the icy fear gripping my heart. "A conspiracy that reaches far beyond the walls of Sunnyside." As Halsey shared his discoveries, piece by piece, the puzzle began to take shape. Each revelation was like a bolt of lightning, illuminating the darkness that had shrouded our understanding. The missing bonds, the secret passages, the mysterious figures lurking in the shadows, all of it started to make a terrible kind of sense. But with each answer came a dozen new questions, each more unsettling than the last. Who was behind this conspiracy? What were their motives? And most importantly, where was Louise? The weight of these unanswered questions hung heavy in the air, as oppressive as the summer heat outside. As the night wore on, the burden of our newfound knowledge settled upon us like a physical weight. The circular staircase creaked and groaned, as if sharing in our unease. Outside, the wind whispered through the trees, carrying with it the promise of more secrets yet to be uncovered. I looked into Halsey's tired eyes, seeing the toll this search had taken on him. The lines on his face seemed deeper, the shadows under his eyes darker. In that moment, I realized that we were standing on the edge of something far more dangerous than we had ever imagined. The conspiracy was vast, its tendrils reaching into the darkest corners of our world, and we were now irrevocably entangled in its web. As Halsey finished speaking, a heavy silence fell over the room. The fire had died down to embers, casting an eerie glow that barely penetrated the growing darkness. Suddenly, a loud crash echoed from somewhere deep within the house, making us both jump. The air in the room grew thick with tension. The truth unfolded before us, heavy and suffocating. The air in the room grew thick with tension. The truth unfolded before us, heavy and suffocating. My heart raced, pounding so loudly I feared others might hear it. Sweat beaded on my forehead, and I could taste the metallic tang of fear on my tongue. The secret chamber, once a source of mystery and excitement, now loomed ominously around us, its walls seeming to close in with each passing moment. From the shadows, a figure emerged. Paul Armstrong, gaunt and haunted, stepped into the dim light. His eyes, once sharp with cunning, now darted nervously around the room like those of a cornered animal. The man we had all believed dead for so long stood before us, a ghost made flesh. The sight of him sent a chill down my spine, raising goosebumps on my arms. As Paul's presence sank in, the pieces of the puzzle began to fall into place with sickening clarity. The respected banker we once knew had fallen from grace in the most spectacular and horrifying way imaginable. His hands, now trembling and pale, had once been stained with both money and blood. The embezzlement from his own bank was shocking enough, but the murder of his son Arnold, it was almost too much to comprehend. I turned to look at Louise, watching as her carefully constructed facade crumbled before my eyes. Her face contorted with anguish, the weight of her involvement finally crushing her. The suspicious behavior, the sudden disappearance, it all made perfect sense now, like the final turn of a key in a lock. She had been protecting Paul all along, a misguided act of loyalty that had cost her everything. The room seemed to shrink around us as Paul's crimes came to light. His voice, barely above a whisper, filled the air with tales of greed and desperation. Arnold, driven by a sense of justice or perhaps filial disappointment, had discovered his father's misdeeds. In that moment, Paul had made a choice that would haunt him forever. He had silenced his own flesh and blood to protect his ill-gotten gains. As the truth spilled out, I couldn't help but think of the ripple effect of one man's actions. Lives shattered like fragile glass, trust broken beyond repair, and the very foundations of Sunnyside shaken to their core. The secret chamber, once a source of intrigue, now felt tainted. It was as if the very walls had absorbed the darkness of Paul's deeds, the air thick with the weight of his sins. Louise's role in this tragedy was like a bitter pill, hard to swallow but impossible to ignore. Her actions, born perhaps of misplaced love or paralyzing fear, had only served to compound the damage. As I looked at her, I saw not the composed woman I had known, but a shell, hollowed out by the weight of her secrets. Her eyes, once bright and full of life, now seemed dull and lifeless. The revelation hung in the air like a heavy fog, obscuring the way forward. Paul Armstrong, once presumed dead, was very much alive, and with him, the ghosts of his past had risen to haunt us all. The embezzlement, the murder, the web of lies, it all came crashing down, leaving us standing in the rubble of what we thought we knew. As the full impact of Paul's confession settled over the room, a sudden commotion outside broke the tense silence. The sound of running footsteps and shouting voices grew louder, approaching rapidly. Paul's eyes widened with panic, darting toward the chamber's exit. In that moment, I realized with a jolt of fear that this nightmare was far from over. Paul Armstrong's desperate bid for freedom was about to begin, and I had a sinking feeling that more tragedy lay ahead. Paul Armstrong's desperate attempt to escape ended in tragedy. His life of deceit and scheming came to a dramatic close, leaving behind a web of unraveled mysteries. The night air hung heavy with a mix of relief and sorrow as we gathered in the dimly lit parlor of Sunnyside. Outside, the wind whispered through the trees, as if nature itself was sighing at the conclusion of our harrowing summer. The news of Armstrong's fate had just reached us, and the room was thick with unspoken emotions. "They found him at the bottom of the circular staircase," Detective Jameson announced, his voice grave. A collective gasp filled the room. The very staircase that had been the center of our summer's mysteries had claimed its final victim. I couldn't help but shudder, remembering the countless times we had ascended and descended those treacherous steps, unaware of the secrets they held. As the detective continued his report, the pieces of the puzzle began to fall into place with dizzying speed. Jack Bailey, who had been living under a cloud of suspicion, stepped out of the shadows. His disappearance, once viewed with skepticism, now stood as a testament to his innocence. "I couldn't let them pin the bank theft on me," Jack explained, his voice hoarse with emotion. "I had to find the truth." Gertrude's eyes shone with unshed tears as she reached for his hand. The tension that had existed between them since Jack's reappearance melted away like frost in the morning sun. Across the room, I watched as understanding dawned in Halsey's eyes. The hurt and confusion that had resided there since Louise's apparent betrayal gave way to a softer, more compassionate gaze. Louise, for her part, seemed to stand taller, unburdened by the secrets she had been forced to keep. "I'm sorry," she whispered to Halsey, her voice barely audible above the crackling of the fireplace. "I never wanted to hurt you." Halsey took her hand, his grip firm and reassuring. "I understand now," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "We've all been pawns in a game we didn't know we were playing." As I watched them, I couldn't help but feel a swell of pride. My nephew had grown so much over the course of this summer, learning to see beyond his own pain to understand the complexities of the human heart. The room fell into a contemplative silence, broken only by the occasional pop from the fireplace. Each of us was lost in our own thoughts, processing the events that had led us to this moment. The peaceful retreat we had sought had become a battleground of secrets and lies, but in the end, it had also become the foundation for new beginnings. I found myself drawn to the window, looking out at the grounds of Sunnyside. The moonlight bathed the lawn in a silvery glow, making the world seem new and full of possibility. How different it looked from the night we had arrived, full of excitement for a quiet summer getaway. Instead, we had been thrust into a whirlwind of mystery and danger. Every creak of the house, every shadow in the hallway, had held the potential for threat. Now, as I looked back on our harrowing adventure, I felt a strange mix of relief and nostalgia. The summer at Sunnyside had changed us all. We had come seeking rest and relaxation, but had found instead a crucible that had tested our courage, our loyalty, and our love. As I turned back to the room, watching Halsey and Louise lost in quiet conversation, Gertrude and Jack sharing a tender moment by the fire, I knew that we had all emerged stronger for it. Halsey and Louise, their love tested and proven true, were on the cusp of a new chapter in their lives. Gertrude and Jack, reunited after a period of misunderstanding and doubt, were rediscovering the strength of their bond. As for me, I found myself looking forward to what the future might hold. The circular staircase, once a source of fear and mystery, now stood as a testament to our resilience. We had climbed its treacherous steps and emerged victorious, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. As the night wore on, the tension in the room gradually eased. Gertrude's laughter, a sound I hadn't heard in what felt like ages, rang out clear and true. It was as if the weight of the world had been lifted from her shoulders. Halsey and Louise sat close together, their hands intertwined, whispering words meant only for each other. I smiled to myself, feeling a sense of peace settle over me. Our summer at Sunnyside had been far from the peaceful retreat we had planned, but it had given us something far more valuable. It had shown us the strength of our bonds, the power of truth, and the resilience of the human spirit. As the first light of dawn began to creep through the windows, I knew that while our adventure at Sunnyside was ending, a new chapter was just beginning. We had weathered the storm together, and whatever the future held, we would face it with the same courage and determination that had seen us through this extraordinary summer.
This book was generated using Speakter's AI voices. You can create human-like voiceovers in over 50 languages.